Okay, so say you need to measure something.
Like maybe it's for a project around the house, or maybe you're tackling a bigger job.
Whatever it is, chances are you're reaching for that trusty tape measure.
But have you ever stopped to think about the story behind this everyday tool?
It is fascinating how something so ubiquitous can have such a rich history.
We're actually taking a deep dive into the world of tape measures today.
And trust me, you're in for some surprises.
I'm ready. Have my measuring tape assumptions challenged.
Our main source for this deep dive is an article from EasyGrind.
It's a website all about tools and DIY projects.
They really get into the weeds on different types of tape measures.
But we're going to start by rewinding the clock way back to 1829.
1829, that's when a gentleman by the name of James Chesterman in Sheffield, England, patented the first spring-loaded tape measure.
Now, what's really interesting is that despite being a groundbreaking invention, Chesterman's tape measure wasn't an overnight success.
Oh, really?
I kind of figured once something like that was invented, everybody would want one.
What was the holdup?
Well, for one thing, they were incredibly expensive back then.
Imagine shelling out $17 for a tape measure in the 1800s.
That was a significant investment for most people.
Wow.
It wasn't until much later, around the 1940s, that tape measures became more affordable and widely adopted.
$17 in the 1800s. That makes a lot more sense.
So who changed? Did somebody figure out a cheaper way to make them?
Exactly.
As manufacturing processes evolved and new materials like plastics were introduced, tape measures became more accessible to the average person.
But before we jump too far ahead, there's another key figure in this story.
Okay.
Alvin J. Fellows.
Okay, tell me about this Alvin fellow.
What did he do?
Fellows came along in 1868, and he's the one who really refined Chesterman's original design.
He improved the spring mechanism and made several other tweaks that ultimately made the tape measure more practical and user-friendly.
So it's like those early adopters who bought Chesterman's tape measure were beta testing it.
And then Fellows came along and released Tape Measure 2.0.
That's fascinating. It makes you think about all the other tools we use today that have gone through similar journeys.
Like what started as a luxury or a specialized tool eventually just becomes commonplace.
Absolutely.
And speaking of commonplace, it's easy to think of a tape measure as well, just a tape measure.
But you'd be surprised by the sheer variety of tape measures out there.
Our Easy Grind article compares it to the diversity you see with hammers or screwdrivers.
Each type fine-tuned for specific tasks.
I bet you have a few different types yourself.
Honestly, I've never even thought about it.
I've got my trusty pocket tape measure that I use for pretty much everything.
But now I'm really curious, where do we even begin with all these different types?
Well, let's start with a familiar friend.
The fabric tape measure.
Okay.
You've probably encountered these in your sewing kit or at a tailor shop.
They're typically made of soft, flexible material like cloth or fiberglass.
And as the name suggests, they're primarily used for taking body measurements or measuring fabric.
Oh, right. I've definitely got one of those tucked away in my sewing basket.
It's a lifesaver when I'm trying to measure something curved or awkwardly shaped.
You couldn't really do that with a regular tape measure.
Exactly. Their flexibility is key for those kinds of tasks.
And they often come in longer lengths than your standard pocket tape measure.
Up to 120 inches.
Wow.
That's essential for anyone working with large pieces of fabric or taking measurements for things like curtains or dresses.
Okay, that makes total sense.
Now, how about those heavy-duty ones I've seen construction workers using?
They look like they could measure a football field.
You're probably thinking of surveyor tape measures.
These beasts can extend up to 500 feet.
And are specifically designed for measuring long distances and uneven terrain.
Okay.
Think about it. If you're surveying a piece of land, you need something durable and accurate that can handle bumps and curves without compromising the measurement.
500 feet.
It boggles my mind trying to picture someone actually using one of those.
I guess that's where the saying, measure twice, cut once, really comes in handy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with those kinds of distances.
Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have your pocket or spring return tape measures.
These are the ones we're all most familiar with, compact.
Portable and perfect for everyday tasks around the house.
Oh yeah, the workhorse of the measuring world.
I love that satisfying whiz sound they make when they retract.
And the little locking mechanism is a game changer.
No more trying to hold the tape steady with one hand while you mark with the other.
That locking mechanism was a significant innovation for sure.
It made it possible for one person to take accurate measurements, which was a huge time saver, especially for professionals.
Right.
And just like with fabric tape measures, pocket tape measures come in various lengths, typically ranging from 6 to 35 feet.
So you can choose the size that best suits your needs.
Options are always good. It's funny, I never realized how much thought went into designing something as seemingly simple as a tape measure.
But speaking of design, the article mentioned that they can be made from different materials.
What's the deal with that?
Ah, yes. The materials used in a tape measure can greatly impact its durability cost and overall performance.
For example, metal cases are incredibly sturdy and can withstand a lot of wear and tear.
Making them a good choice for professionals or anyone who uses their tape measure frequently.
Okay, so those are the ones I've seen on construction sites. They look like they could survive a hurricane.
But they're probably a bit overkill for just measuring furniture.
You're right, for everyday tasks, a plastic case will do just fine.
They're lighter weight, more affordable, and still hold up well to regular use.
But it's not just about the case. The material of the tape itself is also important.
That's true. I've definitely had those flimsy plastic tape measures where the numbers wear off after a while.
Not exactly ideal for precision work.
You want a tape that's both durable and easy to read.
For surveyor tapes, fiberglass is a popular choice.
It's incredibly strong, yet lightweight, making it ideal for measuring long distances.
Okay.
Plus, it's resistant to stretching and shrinking, ensuring accuracy, even in varying temperatures.
So that's why those giant surveyor tapes are always wound so loosely on those big wheels.
It's all about that flexibility,
And
right?
it's funny, you'd think something as thin as a tape measure wouldn't need to be flexible. But it makes sense when you think about it that way.
Exactly. And when it comes to those classic pocket tape measures, the tape is usually made of metal, often steel,
Metal tapes are incredibly durable and hold their shape well.
which is essential for getting precise measurements.
However, there's a trade-off. Those metal tapes can have sharper edges.
Ooh, yeah, I've definitely gotten a few paper cuts from those before. Nothing ruins a DIY project faster than a bleeding finger.
Right. So always handle those with care.
Now, let's talk about some of those features that make tape measures even more user-friendly.
Because as we've established, the evolution of tools is all about making our lives easier.
Okay, so we talked about materials and the different types of tape measures and even how much they cost back in the 1800s.
But what about those cool extra features?
I'm thinking specifically about magnetic tapes.
They're like magic for anyone who works with metal.
They are pretty ingenious, aren't they?
A magnetic hook or end on the tape eliminates the need for an extra pair of hands when you're working with metal surfaces.
Right.
No more fumbling to keep the tape in place while you try to mark your measurements.
It's a seemingly small detail that makes a world of difference for professionals like electricians and metal workers,
For sure. And then you got those rust-resistant tapes.
which are a godsend for anyone who lives in a place with, shall we say, unpredictable weather.
I've definitely learned the hard way that not all tape measures are built for the great outdoors.
True.
Moisture and metal don't always play nicely together.
Rust-resistant coatings and tapes have become increasingly popular, especially for those who work outdoors or in damp environments.
It's all about extending the life of your tools and ensuring they can handle whatever conditions you throw at them.
Makes sense.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
From the surprisingly high cost of those early tape measures
To the evolution of materials.
and those clever little features that make our lives easier.
It's amazing how much there is to learn about something as seemingly simple as a tape measure.
It really makes you appreciate the ingenuity that goes into the tools we often take for granted.
And it makes you wonder what's next for the tape measure.
That's a great question.
We live in a world of lasers and smartphone apps that can measure distances and all sorts of futuristic gadgets.
What does the future hold for this surprisingly enduring tool?
Well, our Izzy Grind article touched on how tape measures have evolved over time.
And I think that evolution will undoubtedly continue.
Perhaps we'll see even more durable and specialized materials integrated digital displays.
Or maybe even tape measures that can communicate with other tools wirelessly.
Ooh, now those are some interesting possibilities.
I'm excited to see what the future holds for the tape measure.
Maybe one day there'll be a collector's item like those vintage woodworking tools you see in antique shops.
Perhaps.
But for now, I think it's safe to say the tape measure has earned its place as a staple in our toolboxes and sewing kits.
It's a testament to practicality, simplicity, and the enduring power of a good idea.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that was a fascinating deep dive into the surprisingly captivating world of tape measures.
We learned about their history, their evolution, and the different types that cater to specific needs.
Who knew there was so much to uncover?
Indeed. It just goes to show that sometimes the most everyday objects have the most extraordinary stories to tell.
Absolutely. So next time you reach for your trusty tape measure, take a moment to appreciate its journey and the ingenuity behind it.
And if you have any fun tape measure stories or predictions for the future of this classic tool, be sure to share them with us on social media.
We'd love to hear from you.
Until next time, keep those measuring tapes handy and those minds curious.